From the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, Engineer Badru Ntege. Please, round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And from the Presidential CEO Forum in Uganda, Irene Birungi Mugisha. We share a surname. If you have a neighbor from Uganda, they'll tell you why. Let's see. Also, from the Lusaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Humphrey Chisala. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And of course, our Director of Investment Promotion, Mr. Chimuka, you are expected there. So I don't know whether you come with your coffee or tea. I don't know what you're coming with because you had quite a lengthy presentation. I want to make sure you're hydrated enough to speak to the conversation we had. And at Huntington, at an opportune time, we'll also invite another stakeholder from Uganda who is very critical for this conversation on trade and investment. She will be speaking from the floor. All right, Huntington, I need to give you a mobile. You have a mobile. I'll give you one here. There are several mics on the table. I'll give you one here. Our director is coming. He's the one taking the other seat.
Wow. Thank you very much, Maurice, and the two presenters. From the presentation, I think you note that there is convergence. Convergence is where the two countries have actually intersected. That when you look at the opportunities that are available in Uganda, they are equally the same opportunities that are available in Zambia. So now we are going to see how do we exploit the potential through collaboration and ensuring that we develop our African continent together. From the two presenters, I note that we still have unexploited potential. Mr. Director, I also want to note that the study that profiled Uganda's iron and steel industry was supported by people from Zambia because of your experience in mining. And they confirmed that our iron ore industry has the highest iron content. Our lowest FE is around 65%, which means that you can convert our iron ore into iron without adding anything. Secondly, the DST is aware that our iron ore processing facility under Tembo Steel uses a reaction agent, what we call a catalyst in chemistry, from Zambia. They import close to 10 tons almost weekly of the reaction agent they use to catalyze steel production. So we are already importing and we are looking for how do we collaborate. However, since they said we talk about money, let me structure our discussion into two things. We are going to discuss trade and then investment. And I'm lucky that I have people from the private sector and people from the government end. I want to start from the Chamber of Commerce, Zambia Chamber of Commerce. I note that the trade volumes between our two countries, in spite of the 30 years of collaboration under COMESA, because from 1994 to 2024 is 30 years, our trade volumes are relatively still lower. Mr. Humphrey, why do you think that trade between our countries is still marginal, and what can we do to improve our trade relations and ensure that we can easily extend and exploit the opportunity provided by the Uganda Airlines?
Thank you very much. From Lusaka Chamber of Commerce, I would like to first introduce the Lusaka Chamber of Commerce as a private membership organization that actually facilitates trade and investment opportunities for in the country. And we also actually create business linkages through a lot of activities, expos, and communication in general. Yes, through moderator, the trade figures between the two countries are extremely low, and this can be attributed to low interaction between the private sector. We are all aware that the private sector is an engine.
The private sector
is the engine that every government uses, to grow trade and investments in the countries. So collaborations, interactions between the two private countries is actually key. And I should actually say that the communication between Uganda and Zambia has been low in terms of advertising each other, dissemination of information between the two private sectors. How can we improve in that? We are saying that as a Lusaka Chamber of Commerce or Chambers of Commerce world over are actually the best communicators, and they circulate informations between the local private sectors and others. So if you associate yourself to the Chambers of Commerce, you are likely to get more information and data about what other partners are doing in the neighboring countries. So we are encouraging as a chamber that business people should belong to credible organizations like chambers for them to get proper information about trade and investments in other countries. This is what we should do between Uganda and Zambia. Uganda has got chambers of commerce there, which is called maybe federation, associations, yes. We need to actually speak with each other as chambers of commerce here. The information that we get through these federations, we feed them to our private sectors here in Zambia. If we know the information, if we know what we need here, that we can take to Uganda, that's where we start from. If the Ugandan people know what Zambia needs, what are our gaps, they start from there. So information dissemination is key. I submit.
Thank you very much. And the person seated next to you, I should say he's the man who's supposed to start the conversation with you. So Badru, it appears that you're failing Uganda's private sector. They have just accused you of not providing us enough and communicating enough with other chambers. So what are you doing as the private sector foundation and in collaboration with Uganda Chamber of Commerce to ensure that we identify these opportunities and then support trade facilitation, being cognizant that we have only 13% or even below of intra-African trade. And all of us believe that trade is the role of the private sector. Actually, government does not involve itself in trade. Government facilitates trade. So what are you doing as the private sector foundation of Uganda in order to ensure that we boost trade between our two countries?
Thank you. And well, trade is really primarily a social conversation. First, you make the communication, you make the connection, and then beyond the connection, you can trade. Without that, you cannot trade. The fact that we now have a 2-hour trade, a 2-hour communications link in terms of physical communication, I think the historical statistics will remain historical. Now let's look at what the opportunities are as we do move forward in terms of in terms of the trade. But before I get there, let me just maybe share for clarity. In Uganda, we do have what we call the Private Sector Foundation, Uganda, and also we do have the Chamber of Commerce. And these two organizations complement each other in different ways in terms of foundations. PSF are a lot more looking at active trade and really making the communications and international connections, and that's why we're heavily partnered with government and also with anybody who's moving around in terms of connectivity. Now, so what do we do where we are now in terms of how do we move forward and how do we explore the different opportunities that are available? PSFU is a member-based organization, and we have members across 9 sectors. So those sectors will be able to come from oil and gas. I represent ICT. We have agriculture. We have the culture as well, and a number of more sectors that I can share later. So The question now comes in terms of the opportunities moving forward. We have had an amazing presentation. I was taking notes and I started taking pictures. Then luckily I'm sitting next to the previous presenter. So next I want a copy of the presentation, so I don't go through the rest of all the options I was trying to look at. I think for me that the future is bright in terms of where we are today. And we do have a lot of linkages in terms of communications. I have a habit when I walk into a room like this, I think everybody who was in here before the presentation, before we started, I spoke to. And I could easily be in Kampala. The conversation, the accent, the mannerisms were the same. So I think the opportunities moving forward are great.
Thank you, Badru. Director, I noted that we shall engage more on the second one, but this one is also critical on terms of standardization. One of the barriers, the non-trade barriers, leaving the non-tax barriers to trade, is the standardization of goods. And as Africa, we struggle a lot to meet the ISO standards. We don't have domesticated standards. So what are the standardization framework for Zambia that can easily facilitate trade with Uganda? And are there opportunities to ensure that we develop common standards? Because I know under ESC and COMESA there are efforts for harmonization of standards. So have you made progress in terms of harmonization of standards such that the private sector find it easier to trade across the two countries?
Thank you for the question. Excuse me. Yeah, definitely there's lots of opportunity in terms of standardizing some of the standards around what is expected from the various products and services that are offered between the two countries. And in terms of the framework for Zambia, you may wish to know that currently Zambia is carrying out quite a lot of reforms in various legislations, policies, laws, to ensure that they align very well with various protocols to which Zambia is a party to, and also importantly to make it easy for traders, entrepreneurs, business people in Zambia to carry out business with their counterparties. So we have an institution that is called BRRA, Business Review Reforms Agency, that is falling under the Ministry of Commerce, right? And so this institution is trying to work very hard to ensure that standardization is achieved and the framework is developed. Of course, it's there already, but enhanced, reformed, reviewed to speak to the current trends in terms of the expected standards for the products and services that are being undertaken. Zambia has its own authorities in terms of regulating standards for products, right? We've got the Zambia Bureau of Standards, we've got the Zambia Quality, Quality Control Agencies, ZAXA, and many other institutions which play a role. So the framework is there, and there's lots of willingness from the side of Zambia to ensure that there's alignment in terms of the standards for homogeneous products between the two, rather not the two, but between Zambia and other trading parties. And so Zambia is always engaging, even at an agency level, as the Zambia Development Agency, we are also participating in terms of engaging with other sister institutions, right, to ensure that we achieve alignment in matters of framework for standards for products and services.
Thank you, Director. Keyword, alignment. Miss Irene, or Mrs. Irene Birungi Mugisha, is our coordinator of CEOs with the President. She's the coordinator of the Presidential CEO Forum. And quite a number of the investors and traders who are trading with Zambia are a part of your group that you coordinate. So going forward, I want to note or to highlight what exactly are we going to do going forward to ensure that quite a number of your private sector CEO, I know Cipra is in here already, selling the pharmaceuticals, your plastics, the temple steels and others, increase on the volume and value of trade with Zambia, and also interacting or linking them with Zambian CEOs within the private sector to ensure that we increase our trade volumes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I want to start by congratulating the Uganda Airlines leadership for this very strategic move. Because when you talk about the bottlenecks that we have in terms of enhancing trade, it is logistics and transport. So with this move of launching the Uganda Airline route to be part of the fleet, it's going to be a change maker or a game change. According to your question, first of all, the Presidential CEO Forum is one of those interventions that was foreseen by the President himself, to see that if you're talking about the private sector-led economy that is moved by the private sector itself, then are you in a position to bring them on board, to have that inclusivity and have any interventions that are spoken directly from them. So we meet with the head of state twice a year, but this is clustered in a way that we make interventions or resolutions that speak to what should be driven by the government. And so I'm pleased, first of all, to speak direct in the room where I have my immediate boss and who is the lead of the delegation here. Back home, we are driven by 4 pillars, that is patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy. But the 2 points I want to speak to is Pan-Africanism and socio-economic transformation. And so from this business forum, what we have seen from the 2 presentations from NPA and also from my immediate neighbor here is the opportunities that I miss. You've just rightly said that we have CIPLA here, we have Movit here, we have Centenary Bank, but with more opportunities. So I would want to speak to collaborations, more enhanced collaborations, and I want to start with the e-mobility industry. The minister, when he was officially opening this forum, he spoke about starting with procuring 3 buses. So that is already our win, yeah? So my immediate colleague here spoke about continuing to see how best can we produce the collaboration in batteries. And if we are producing buses, the very important raw materials or minerals that are required, that is lithium, that is copper, and we see that they're the 2nd largest producers of copper. So that is already a take home for us. We need to continue to create awareness. To me, such forums bring about awareness. Now we are aware of who Zambians are in terms of what they're producing, what can we bring on board. So we're also going to profile more of those products that we can be able to bring to Zambia and add value. But also want to speak strongly to the ATMs that the minister, who is representing the minister but our lead delegate, was able to speak to. When you talk about agro-industrialization, that is a whole value chain. Yeah, we start from the raw material itself or the produce into the processing, the packaging, and then the market. So we know that Uganda is blessed in terms of fruits and vegetables, and we saw this is an opportunity. So our message back home is how can we profile those that are into this produce, that they can be able to add value and then we able to export to Zambia and vice versa. But also, the message here is also talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area. That is something that we need to enhance and embrace, and we know that this is our game changer as well, because it speaks to being in position to have the small and medium enterprises into medium and then into large. How can you do this? Through such integration that is already being championed by both countries. We are relating into the stable economic policies. That is one thing that we can both benefit from. This morning I talked to Paul Mogambwa, who is from Uganda, and he's going into real estate here. You know, he has already 6 projects aligned. And one thing I learned from him was, you know, the proactiveness of the Zambian government. You can be able to get your incorporation within 1 day. If you're investing about 150,000 to 500,000 million, then you're able to get tax incentives as well as work permits. So these are things that will definitely attract the investments and trade to grow between Uganda and as well as Zambia. So a lot can be said. In mineral, it goes without saying, science and technology, we are looking forward. And so the future is actually bright, if I may say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maurice, kindly move the microphone to the Director of Immigration. Reason is that when you're trading, it involves movement of people and then goods. Because people move fast and then goods follow them. As Maurice moves the microphone to immigration, I want Ms. Rossetti Kyokuhabwa to tell us what is that framework, whether the framework for immigration in our country supports free movement of both goods and people. I know Badru will note about it later, that our investment incentive framework are skewed towards facilitating foreigners, not facilitating the locals. When you see where do the incentives start from, the minimum requirement may not be, a local may not be able to have the money. But I wanted to start with the Director General of Zambia Development Agency in terms of what is your incentive structure, because I know we have serious investors. Our MP, Mr. Kateshi, may set up Gorilla Heights at the Victoria Falls by the time we live here, and you need to assure him that the incentive framework supports. So how is the incentive framework in Zambia like?
Yes, thank you for that important question. Definitely Zambia has one of the most attractive tax regimes when it comes to attracting investors. So even the incentives framework is very is prominent, so to say. We do have various incentives that the government has put in place, right? Of course, we appreciate that incentives are more secondary in trying to attract investors. Primarily, I think we have already highlighted some of the reasons why we believe investors need to participate in the Zambian economy. But when we speak about incentives, we have incentives that are, first of all, that are sector-based, right? So depending on the sector that you want to go in, you may get certain incentives that may not be applicable to the other sector, number one. Number two, we also have incentives that would be location-based, right? So what do I mean? If you are going to set up your investments, right, according to our Investment, Trade and Business Development Act, where we draw our mandate as ZDA, if you are going to set up your investment in a rural area, okay, and there's a definition for a rural area. If you're going to set up your investment in a rural area and you meet certain criteria, okay, number one, then you qualify for certain incentives that are fiscal, all right? But again, if you're not in a rural area, but you want to set up, say, in a special economic zone, we have one in Lusaka here, Lusaka Province, Lusaka District, called Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone. If you set up investment in that particular facility, you will be eligible, of course, depending on the criteria that is set up, that is set up to enjoy some of the incentives that are there. So incentives will include, for example, zero rating of duty, okay, for plant and equipment. So, for example, if you are in the priority sector, and there are 5 priority sectors according to the government, right? We've got the manufacturing sector, mining sector, energy, agriculture, ICT, stroke, infrastructure, okay? So if you are investing in any one of these priority sectors and you want to bring in your equipment, plant, equipment and ore from outside the country, then there will be zero rating of customs as you bring in the equipment. Also, when we come to the income tax side of it, right, again, depending on the sector, you may qualify for accelerated depreciation, in some cases up to 100% in the first year, okay, again, depending on the sector. And accountants, I'm sure you understand that accelerated depreciation less tax in the years that you provide for. So if you're providing for 100% of your depreciation in that particular year, it means your tax obligation gets to be reduced. We also have incentives around, again, depending on the sector and what you are doing. For example, so if you are in an economic zone, all right, and you are in a certain sector, so what is produced in the economic zone, like the one I've mentioned, and you export, okay, so the profits that will accrue from the export side of what is produced from an economic zone will have a lesser rate in terms of tax to pay. When we talk about the dividends that are declared from those profits from the exports, okay, you won't pay any tax on the dividends. So we can go on to speak about the incentives, quite a huge array of incentives that Zambia provides for the investors.
Thank you, Director. Pass the microphone to Mrs. Mugisha, before I come here. I note that part of the resolutions you make under the PCF are around the incentive structure. Are your incentives as attractive as the Director has mentioned, such that the Zambian investors who are interested in Uganda can also come?
Yeah, very true. I'll give you an example of the recent budget, where we're able to have the zero VAT on the e-mobility manufactured and the manufacturing equipment, but also those who are doing the charging points. But also the income tax that was also being able to be adopted through the budget. So yes, he speaks to that very well. And to me, what I want to encourage more is how best can we get this going? So we need to start now, and we need to take advantage of, one, the peace and stability that both countries, benefit from. We need to take advantage of the stable economic policies that we all are sharing, but also take advantage of the goodwill from the heads of state. So both the Zambian president and also the president back home.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mugisha. And Badru, for him, is from the private sector and is an investor. So how best can the private sector optimize the incentives that Mrs. Mugisha has talked about and the Director has also highlighted? And then secondly, how do we ensure that we utilize both the opportunities, Ugandans and Zambians?
Thank you. And this is interesting, and thanks for making sure that we had from Zambia, then from Uganda. Now, from a private sector point of view, what looks interesting from an indigenous investor is these incentives are designed to allow us to cross-pollinate. Because if you're a Zambian investor and you have a population of 20 million people, Uganda we have 48 million. So if you cross over to Uganda, you'll get these wonderful incentives Irene has talked about, right? If you're a Ugandan investor, you won't get those incentives if you're indigenous. But if you cross over to Zambia, you get the incentives. So in a way, the incentives, as much as they are positive, from a business perspective, if I look at the numbers, they're actually encouraging me to leave home and go and invest elsewhere. Because as a Ugandan, some of those wonderful incentives are not there. So if I come here, I am welcomed with wonderful welcome, right? Which I can't get on the other side. Likewise, if you're here, time for you to come home to Uganda. And yesterday when we were introducing, I was saying that I'm an African based in Uganda, because that's really what's happening. And I just wanted to add on one other interesting thing, that comparison we talked about, I think I talked about it yesterday, is as Africa, what opportunity are we leaving on the table from a private sector point of view? If you look, Africa is exactly nearly the same as India from population. So with 1.48 billion in India and 1.4 billion in Africa, that's a population. If you look at the GDP, India is doing 3.73 trillion and Africa is doing 3.5 trillion. But guess what? We're looking at 54 countries in Africa with different borders. Now, can you imagine what we could do if we are tracking India together with all our 54 limitations? Can you imagine what Africa could do without the limitations? I mean, with 54 limitations, we are on par with India. So I think for me, the conversation to what you're asking for is we need to figure out how we align these incentives across so that we can encourage this cross-pollination of...
Thank you very much, Badru. And you know, the DST was happy when you mentioned that. I know he's spearheading the process of reviewing the incentive framework such that they are not only outward looking, but they are also facilitating within. So we want to also facilitate you, and that's part of the resolutions from the PCF, that we facilitate incentives for local investors and others. Before I come to Mr. Humphrey, I want to invite Ruru to get 2 questions from the audience, and then we can go to Mr. Humphrey and then wrap up the discussion. Mr. Ruru?
Okay, do we have any questions? I'm going to be taking 2 questions. Any questions? We have one here.
I just want to give a clarification because the tax incentives are available by the government of Uganda, and I have worked in government, but I'm also a legislator and I'm an investor. Actually do not necessarily discriminate between local and foreign. I have a guide here which I can share for those who may want to know. But the challenge, I think, sometimes Ugandans, we mix challenges. The challenge of capital versus many foreign investors come with patient capital, which may not necessarily be available easily for some of our local investors. And so they kind of mix those 2 challenges. But I want to tell you that I have invested, and I know many people have invested locally. The policies do not discriminate. And as Parliament, I've been sharing with my peers here, we always try to look out for those problems. For example, if you are an investor in the industrial park or you have invested in a hotel up country, if you are local or foreign, you get the same treatment like anyone else. So I just thought I would clarify that and encourage people to seek out for these incentives. And also annually when we make policies, we make changes, but they have to be both inward and outward looking.
Okay, thank you, Honorable.
Thank you so much for that contribution. We have one more question here.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. My name is Paul Mugambwa, in the process of moving to Zambia to invest in real estate and construction. And my question is for Mr. Humphrey Chisala and Mr. Chimuka and Nketani regarding the mortgage rates. For us in real estate, you know, with the various meetings I've had, the biggest bottleneck we're facing is the prohibitive mortgage rates in the local banks for people borrowing in local currency, in Kwacha. It's about 63.5%, if I'm not mistaken, which is very prohibitive for our off-takers who intend to buy the properties that we plan to develop. So I just want to know if there's any intentional effort being made by the government to regulate and bring the lending rates down to an affordable level. Because back home we're at 22% on the UGX and about 12 to 15% on the US dollar. I stand to be corrected, which is somewhat manageable. But for Zambia, we found that a very big challenge, especially in marketing the properties we intend to sell to people who may not have the cash readily available and intend to seek bank assistance. So if you could kindly advise on any efforts being made towards that, I'd truly appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruru. And Mr. Humphrey, we're going to start with you to respond to the question, and then you give your final comment and take away for the Chamber of Commerce, and we shall follow the same line and conclude with Ms. Irene.
Thank you very much. Actually, what you have brought is a very, very big challenge even here in Zambia. The cost of borrowing is actually very high, and normally we've got, as a Chamber of Commerce, we engage ourselves with various financial sectors that actually we speak to so that we ease the burden of borrowing for our members and sometimes even negotiate the rates. So that is one way that we do to mitigate such a problem. And we also have some institutions that actually do order financing, and then such that if you've got orders to supply something, you may go to such institution and they can finance the same. However, I will still actually say that the rates are quite high, and these are something that we are still negotiating day by day, as our mandate is to advocate, for such things. Coming for a wrap-up, I would say that as a country, we've got incentives that can actually even benefit our colleagues from Uganda. If you come as investors in this country, you enjoy duty-free, on machinery that you may order outside or come with. And also, you also enjoy some income tax exemption for the first year that you come in the country. And also, if you come and set up your factories or your business in our economic zones, there are a lot more incentives actually, which can even be shared through by the ZDA, through emails and other presentations that we may share after this forum. I think that is some of the things that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badru Ntege. Parting shots and way forward.
I think thanks for the clarification on incentives, but there's a number of alignments that we'll do off the record. However, the real message here is the continent is open. We shouldn't be defined by borders. Ability to move across borders has been open, and from a private sector point of view, we welcome that. We'd like to ask the private sector bodies around here that I'm here ready to create the connections between Zambia private sector and Uganda private sector, and we'd like to see how we can strengthen this relationship and make sure that maybe we have a follow-up session with yourselves in Uganda, where you now come and listen from a local point of view, and we'll continue this relationship. Thank you very much.
Badru, Director.
Yes, my closing remarks will be in form of a response to that query around interest rates. Of course, I will not speak on behalf of the Ministry of... I will not speak on behalf of authorities that, look at those matters of the fiscal, finance, central bank and all. But I think I'll speak from the perspective of an investment promotion agency, right? We understand that the ZDA is there to listen to the concerns from the investors. But one comfort that I drive is the fact that the government of Zambia is a very listening government. I think I did point out the fact that our president is coming from the private sector, right? And so you will notice that even his policies, his passion towards the private sector is quite evident. Now, he has put up, I already spoke about the reforms that are happening. He has put up a structure that is called the PPDF, Public-Private Dialogue Forum, right? And so the PPDF is there to bring together the public sector and the private sector and look at the various challenges that they are facing in their various sectors. So there is a committee around finance, and so matters around finance, challenges in the finance space can always be tackled under this initiative by the head of state, the PPDF initiative. Also, you may want to derive comfort from the fact that the ZEA also does play an advocacy role, okay? So we do take note of the challenges, and we participate in various fora, policy, making fora and so on, and we can always make our contributions in terms of advocacy after we collect concerns like the one that has been raised. But take comfort from the fact that the government is interested, and we have the PPDF and other structures within the governance system that can look at such concerns and make it very easy for the private sector to participate in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mrs. Mugisha.
Yes, again, to add on the voice of my colleagues here is the continuity of promoting connection, the connection between the people and the connectivity of the goods and services to the different borders. And I want to speak to the fact that we need to have more of the Zambians who are the Dangotes. We need to have more of the Ugandans who are the Dangotes. And this can only be done through such interventions of having forums. And so I'll speak through the DS who is here, that we need to see another business forum that we can champion to Zambia, that will speak to business, business to government, and this is the only way we'll be able to have the joint ventures, the public-private partnerships, and all the other benefits that we want to speak to. But also to add on the voice that yes, how best can we continuously speak to the bottlenecks of trade and investment, and that will give us a good way of building a solid Africa and one that works together. We heard from the minister that we need to fast track the one currency. I learned this morning that we are losing that 50 billion through visa swiping, and no, we do it as a good thing. I'm paperless, I have a visa, I can do that. But there's a constraint on it that we are actually empowering more economies out there, not ourselves. So yeah, going forward, let's speak openly. The awareness bit is very key, that when we inform the different business practitioners, then we'll be able to see the change. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are open to doing trade, reducing the transaction costs, exploiting the investment incentives, and ensuring that Africa continue to rise. And Uganda Airlines has provided an opportunity of ensuring that in 2.5 hours, 3 hours, you are in Kampala, you do whatever you want to do, you return the following day by doing 4 flights a week from Entebbe to here. And in trade, we know that one of the challenges is traveling the 1,600 from Kampala, 1,600 kilometers from Kampala to Lusaka, which my boss, Dr. Usman, used to drive when he was working here, makes business impossible. But with the 3 hours, you cut the distance in a very best way, and trade becomes easy. I note the director has one more thing, and then we close. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Our interaction ends here. My panel, I'm grateful. Thank you for the insights, and we look forward to exploiting the opportunities. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, our moderator. I'm just going to ask that our panel just stand in front for a photo. Thank you so much. No, just on stage is fine. I think it's great. The photographer's stage is fine. All right, great. So thank you so much to our panelists for giving us the expert guide on doing business in Uganda and Zambia. For any further questions, I think we're still going to have some networking once this session is over. So please do feel free to approach the panelists for any more questions. Thank you to all those that contributed also. And the question we had from the gentleman. A round of applause for them. So as they leave the stage, I have a short story. Yes, to the gentleman. A round of applause for them.